Yeah, I think number one is never think that you or your loved ones would never fall for something. Let go of that, because that when that mindset sets in and something does start to happen, that's when it triggers deep dive into it, because the person thinks I would never fall. I'm not going to fall for that. I wouldn't fall for a scam. This is the real thing.
All right, welcome to the F Words podcast. I have with me today John Forbes from Forbes Financial Group in Carbondale. And John, we're going to talk about something that is pretty scary today, senior scams and the things that are taking people for a ride for all their money. John, number one, thank you for being here today. And then number two, is this a real problem? Is this something that people need to be worried about?
Sadly, yes, Nick. It is incredibly painful to see. Particularly a senior citizen go through and have to experience these scams. It's. I read recently that 1 in 6 people over the age of 65 have reported some kind of financial fraud in their lives, and only 1 out of 44 actually gets reported to the agency. So it's a vast problem. And what I've found is, while it's elder financial abuse, there are so many things that kids and grandkids can do to help make a difference and help avoid some of these things happening.
Well, and so I think that I like to kind of frame these for what's the problem that keeps people up at night? And, this kind of affects a lot of different people from a lot of different angles. If you're a kid, a son or a daughter that has, aging parents that maybe aren't incredibly tech savvy, or maybe they're pretty tech savvy for their age, but you're worried about them because they're the one of the main targets here. If you're somebody who has worked your entire life to sort of build that nest egg and saved up, and you want to make sure that that you don't fall for something, or you don't have an issue, and then if you're somebody who is elderly, and maybe somebody's reaching out to you and offering you something that sounds way too good to be true, and you're not sure to determine is this your lucky break that's going to change your entire life, or is this something that might be emptying your bank account? This affects a lot of people in different ways. And so before we dive into this, John, what I'd like to do is, will you just talk just a little bit about why this is such a big passion for you? Why is this something that you really want to dive into and help protect people against? And why is it such a big problem?
Yeah, it's a big problem because of a number of things. As you've got people living longer and living more independent lives, they become more and more of a target for scam artists. And what's so tough is there's really two things. There's the fact that these scam artists are very good at what they do. They aren't fly by night folks. They have perfected. They're artists. They have perfected the art of scamming people, and they look for opportunities where people are maybe caught a little off guard, a little bit weak. Sadly, I've personally seen, and I'm not talking about a $1,000 or a $500 gift card. I'm talking tens of thousands of dollars, and in some cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars that these scam artists can get into and disrupt with seniors' lives. What seems to be a commonality with all of these, and let me start with this. What's a commonality that was shocking? Every instance where I've seen this happen personally, these are some of the best and brightest people. These aren't people who are struggling with memory issues or health issues. These are bright, brilliant college graduates, retired professionals. Some of my most savvy investors, honestly, have been caught up in this. And it's something where the other common facet in all of this is they are all either single or widowed. And I think these scam artists, when they can get a little nibble on somebody, I'm sure they're doing some background research, and if they can find someone who's lost a spouse recently or within the last 2 or 3 years, that is prime property for them to really try to go after somebody and catch them in a weak moment because they don't have that person that they've had for decades and decades to bounce things off of, or to ask that simple question, does this sound right? That seems to be the area where they are particularly successful at getting into and scamming clients out of tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars.
And there's technology driving this too, right? So one of the things that has changed is this feels like it is accelerating. It feels like it's everywhere, and it's the rise of the AI driven scams. It's a rise of giving someone from maybe another country potentially the ability to write and speak like somebody who is a native English speaker, which the days of the Nigerian prince scam, right? That's the one that we all kind of think about is the growing up, somebody emails you out of the blue and they're Nigerian prince and they just need you to wire them $2,000 and they're going to send you all their wealth. I think that we have this thought of like, oh, that could never happen to me. That could never happen to my parents. My parents are too smart for that. But with AI on the rise, that's changing faster than ever. And John, you said something, in what you just talked about here that I think is so important is the people falling for this, the people who are getting taken advantage here are not stupid people. They're not people who are just, randomly putting their credit card number online and getting taken advantage of. They are getting taken advantage of systematically by somebody who is preying on somebody at a moment of vulnerability. And the reality is there was a time where I said that could never happen to me. And, somebody who is less tech savvy is the one who has to be worried. But the reality of the situation is we all need to be concerned now, don't we?
Absolutely, Nick. And just as I just kind of think about the last 2 or 3 instances where I've seen this, it's really, it's not even been the AI stuff yet. The AI stuff can be kind of frightening. I'm sure there's going to be additional steps and things to help address AI. Family having a code word, for instance, or something where if someone's calling, if they don't know the code word, then that's not them. But what I've seen recently, and these have been devastating situations. And when I say devastating, it's not just the finances. Of course, the finances are painful, but it's across the board. The what I hear from the folks that this happened to is, I thought I was smarter than this. I didn't think I would fall for something like this, and the scam artists are so manipulative. In one instance, it was a male and female, and they tag teamed, and they would call the client 15 to 20 times a day, and just mentally and emotionally wear this person down until they were almost doing it out of just, I'm going to give them the money so they'll stop hounding me. And the mental and emotional weight that is just heaped on their shoulders when they feel like they've been taken advantage of and they should have known better. That's the thing that carries on years and years beyond whatever financial robbery was performed. It's that robbery of their sense of dignity and the robbery of their sense of independence.
And so when you talk about this, these repeated phone calls, are these someone who is extorting, or is this somebody who is pulling on the heartstrings, or can it be both? What form do these take?
It can go both ways. I think, sadly, as I reflect on 2 or 3 fairly recently that I'm aware of, and this is something, again, please talk to your parents or your grandparents about this very thing. At a time of being somewhat lonely and isolated, they get these random calls, and they almost start them just as somebody to talk to. So there becomes this unusual emotional attachment very quickly when someone who's lonely and isolated is having a 20 or 30-minute conversation that they haven't had in years with anybody. And the scam artists just kind of ingratiate themselves into this person's life, and that repetitive calling and repetitive conversations leads that person to believe this has got to be my friend. They wouldn't scam me. Look how kind and nice they are to me. And I've heard of seniors who take those calls just to torment the caller, to just kind of play with them and lead them along. And I've got to say, please don't do that. Don't you think you would never fall for something, but you might give up just enough information that if they've got other information on you through accessing your personal records, they could use that information that you give them to create issues later on down the road that have nothing to do with that particular scam. So don't entertain them. Don't take the call for your own entertainment. Don't take the call so you can have someone to talk to. And I would just urge, not only seniors but kids and grandkids, be aware that that's what they're doing to your parents. They are, or your parent is ingratiating in such a way that it doesn't feel like it would ever be a scam for them to ask for money.
So, John, these scams can take form in so many different ways. And the one when we were doing our research for this, we found that tech support scams in 2023 cost people over like $1.3 billion. Yeah. That number is insane. In your experience, what are some of the hallmarks that people need to watch out for, or what are some of the ways that you can give people the tools to, like, I don't know, pause and go, wait a second, maybe I need to ask another question, or maybe this person telling me that I shouldn't tell anybody about what happened is a red flag. Do you have any sort of advice for, what's the checklist of the things that you might not realize are a scam until you pause to really look at them?
The very first thing I would say is, anytime someone says you've won something, but you owe money before you can collect, scam. There's not a legitimate organization out there that you would win anything from that would ask you to pay something in advance. Number two, if whoever you're talking to discourages you talking to family members or your CPA or your financial advisor, that's another red flag. My most recent situation I had, when I started prying and asking some more questions in this particular situation, the person I was talking to said, they told me not to tell you. And so right there, red flag. But again, this was after weeks of 10 and 20 conversations a day with these people that I suddenly became the outsider with someone who I've known for 30 or 40 years. I became the outsider that was questioned about my motives. And so it's amazing to see how quickly that these scam artists can turn someone's life completely upside down.
And so it sounds like there's a couple things that jump right out at me. I really like the fact that you kind of boiled this down to this thought of, like, if you won something and someone's calling to tell you won something and that you have to pay money before you get that thing, there is no way that this is not a scam. Right. You need to be having a conversation with somebody who can verify that. If on top of that, they're telling you not to talk to your financial advisor, not to talk to your banker, not to talk to your friends, your closest friends and family about it, immediate red flags. You need someone in your corner. And I think that is a lesson from two sides of the street. One, if you're the person going through that, you got to have somebody in your corner who you can trust, that you can say, wait a second, this seems fishy. John, you're my financial advisor. I've known you for years. Can you give me some insight? But moreover, the thing that you kind of said that hit hard is, if you're someone who is young and you have, parents that are of the age of being a target here, having a good relationship with your parents, having those conversations with your parents, having that connection point where they have that trust to reach out to you can make all the difference as well. So just kind of knowing what's going on in their lives.
Yeah, it does. And I'm not saying this out of guilt or to try to guilt anyone out of anything, but it does remind us how important keeping relationally connected with our loved ones is. And that weekly call, or that call every other day, or whatever it might be in your family, is something that is yearned for by our senior citizens. They want that engagement in your life. As far as practical things and discussions you can have, another thing that kind of came to mind, and each family has to go through this, and figure out their path toward this. But one thing that would be extremely helpful is if that senior family member would permit you to have access to looking at the account activity in your checking and savings accounts. It's not giving them any access to write a check or to do anything with the money, but just so they can go in every once in a while and look and say, "Oh, wow, Mom, that $6,000 bill you paid, like, what was that?" And get some engagement to help get in front of some of these scams. Because here's the other thing I learned: when someone does fall for a scam situation, and I'm talking about seniors particularly, once they've fallen for it once, they are exponentially more likely to fall for it again, which you would think sounds counterintuitive, but it's not, because the way these scam artists set it up, for instance, let's say they call and tell you you've won the lottery, and you've won a $100,000 lottery, and there is a $1,200 processing fee to get this moving. And they have enough engagement with the person that they reluctantly believe, oh, okay, maybe I have won, so they pay the $1,200 fee. Then they'll call back and say, you're not going to believe this, but you actually qualified, and you elevated to the $500,000 level. Now for that we're going to need $25,000 for fees and initial. There was a term they used, a winnings tax. It's not even an income tax; it's a winnings tax. And the person believes, well, gosh, if I've won that level of money, okay, and then they get into where they're asking and having a serious conversation with someone, saying, well, if you can't pay that $250,000, let's get a mortgage on your house. And convincing someone who's had their house paid off for 30 years to take out a mortgage so they don't lose that opportunity to get their winnings. And it sounds outrageous when I say it, but because they drip over time, and it's a little bit and a little bit more and a little bit more, and the outcome it becomes, once someone has kind of gotten caught up in that web, they think, I'm in this deep, I might as well finish it and see what happens, because this is the chance of a lifetime to get this access to this kind of money. So it becomes frightening, and that's why catching that $1,000 or $2,000 or $2,500 check in mom or dad's account and having them talk to you about what's going on, it can literally make the difference in whether someone gets scammed for $2,000 or $200,000.
And I think that you hit something really on the head, nail on the head. And the two things that come to mind is, one is the poker term is like pot committed, right? You're in for a dime, in for a dollar type of thing. You get scammed once, and then it's like, oh well, you don't want to look stupid, or you don't want to lose it now. You got to keep going. And the other thing that these scammers do a lot of times is they let you arrive at the bad idea yourself. Mm-hmm. So like, oh, John, it's really terrible that you're going to lose, the chance at the $2 million lottery winnings. If there was only some way that you could get $25,000, and then pretty soon you're like, I got it. What if I put a mortgage on my house? And you're like, I don't know. You think you could do that? You think you could pull your money out of your retirement? And so they are. You said at the beginning of this, they're scam artists. That's why this happens at such a prevalent rate.
And what's shocking, Nick, is we all hear a scam like this and think, I would never fall for it. I promise you, under the right conditions, they can get their claws into anybody. It is that idea that I would never fall for it, or mom would never fall for something like that. Yes, she will. Yeah, it's not that she would; she will. It happens, and I can't reiterate. I'd rather have families in these discussions over communicate on something like these financial frauds and scams, because again, the scam artists are so good at this. They know if they can just get, if they can nick you a little bit, that they're in, and they know that they can, and they are such emotionally manipulative people, evil people, but they know how to pull the strings to make sure you don't turn over information too soon that would help authorities identify who they are.
We were talking about how prevalent this is, and the other statistic that I found is $3 billion a year. Seniors lose $3 billion a year to scam. That number is so high. 80% of people who are scammed through some sort of like telemarketing through the phone. What is about the senior population and especially about phone calls that makes that so risky, especially for the senior population?
Yeah, I think, Nick, it does. It gets back to, especially in situations where let's even ignore the widow situation where they're lonely and just want to have a conversation. One thing that I've seen this for years, is when folks retire, they lose access to one of their main social interactions or the place where they make friends. And so as they get older and friends pass away, they have fewer and fewer friends. They become more susceptible to engage in conversations. And our seniors, they didn't grow up with the internet. They didn't grow up with literally a computer that could launch a spaceship on your phone. So they still are really comfortable with old school technology, and that's where the phone is really a scam artist's best friend.
You actually just said something that a light bulb moment for me, and it is when I was a kid, right, and I'm sure the same is true for you. When the phone rang, you answered it. You didn't need there wasn't caller ID, right? You answered it. Right. You said hello, whatever it is, and you had a conversation with that person, and maybe it's your neighbor down the street, maybe that's a complete stranger. The rise of sort of the telemarketer generations and the spam phone calls, that's still something that has happened only in the last decade or so, that they've really gotten to where they are now. The text messages are out of control. And so being susceptible for that, is definitely an age thing. The one that I want to bring up that I think we should talk about a little bit is the random text message that says, like, you get a text message and it's the middle of the afternoon and it says, "Hey, are you still coming to lunch? Hey, I wanted to wish you a happy birthday. Hey, have you heard back from Sarah?" And these are text messages and you're like, wait, this is from a number I don't know. This seems like it might relate to me. And then the real danger of these is you go, I'm a good person. If they're thinking they're meeting somebody for lunch, I've got to at least let them know that they texted the wrong phone number.
Right.
And so the story goes, you text them back. It's like, oh, hey, I think you have the wrong number. And pretty soon they have adapted that they turn that into a conversation. Oh, silly me. I'm so silly. Have you ever texted the wrong number? It happens all the time. I'm meeting my granddaughter. And then you start a conversation back, and pretty soon you're in a text message conversation, hook, line, and sinker, with somebody who is going out of their way to scam or manipulate you into a conversation that seems innocent.
Yeah, absolutely. I think texting is going to take a more active role, but and it's not even to dispute that. But I can't tell you, in every in 3 out of the 4 situations I'm aware of most recently, it's been phone calls. It's not been texts, or there was one instance where you've got a virus on your computer and they panic someone into taking steps that they didn't need to take. But it's that for older folks, the old school technologies still work best for scam artists.
You mentioned something about there's this problem of when you fall for a scam, not only does it take a financial toll, but then it takes this emotional toll of like, I should have known. I'm embarrassed. I'm scared to report it, or I don't want to bring it up. I don't want to tell people about it. And I think that's one of the reasons that we're doing this today, is that cautionary tale that this is really happening. And it's happening to good, intelligent, smart people, and that it's so important that you open that door to have that conversation now, not later.
Oh yeah, I cannot reiterate with just the friends and folks that I know that have been preyed upon actively by these. If you gave me a list of 100 people, I would literally, these would be the last 10 I'd put on the list. That type of person. So I cannot stress enough how it's not that they're gullible. It's not that they are dumb, or it's not that there's a memory issue. It's that in the right moment, they let a conversation get a little too far and allowed these scam artists to get into pulling their heartstrings, because that's almost always where it goes.
So, one thing that I find in this conversation is this seems like an uncomfortable thing to bring up, right? And I think that, even in, talking to sort of my parents and saying, hey, this is something that I'm worried about. Can we talk about this? They're going to be resistant of like, oh, you think I'm stupid, or you think I'm going to fall for that. And maybe you could kind of give us a guide or sort of a playbook of, how would you suggest we go about opening that conversation on both sides of the table? If you're somebody who is of retirement age and you're not there yet necessarily, but it's something you want to be aware of, or if you're somebody who's my age and looking at my aging parents, and I'm not really worried about them today, but I am worried about them in 10 years and in 20 years. That technology is going to change a lot. How do I bring up that conversation? What advice would you give?
Well, and this is my own personal experience on this. It's hard to have that kind of conversation with your parents, especially if they are people who have been fiercely independent and are quite proud of their of where they're at right now, health wise and financially and mentally and emotionally, things are all clicking. There's a thought that I would never ever fall for this. So I wish I had the perfect answer for you, Nick, to say how to engage it. What I hope happens is that by us talking about these stories and me telling you, these are not gullible people. These are brilliant, very sharp, fiercely independent people who got caught up in something that quickly got beyond themselves, and I hope by sharing that message that it's the best and brightest that these folks can find a way to just completely destroy them, mentally, emotionally, and sadly financially.
So, John, on the other end of things, if you're somebody who is getting that news that is too good to be true, maybe you're deep into a conversation that you might be questioning. Would you give me your top 3, your top 5, your top 10 list of the red flags, the reddest of the red flags? If this comes across your desk, you need to stop what you're doing and have a conversation with someone you trust who is not the person you're on the phone with.
Yeah. Okay. So number 1 is if they're requiring if they're requiring a call to action immediately, that it's not something that you can think about or review or discuss with anyone else. We need to act on this right now. That's a red flag. If they indicate that they don't want you to tell anybody about this because it's a surprise, that's a red flag. If they discourage communicating with your CPA or your legal team or your banker or your financial advisor, another big red flag. If they start out and they are constantly referring to you as my friend, that's the last one I saw was these 15 to 20 calls a day. They would pose every conversation 4 or 5 times with my friend. I'm so glad we got to touch base today. I'm so glad we got to talk. I'm glad I caught up with you. My friend, I missed you. How are you doing? How did dinner go last night? They do these things to try to ingratiate themselves. That's a big red flag. If somebody's calling you my friend and you don't know them from Adam, they're not your friend. So that would be another issue. And here's another one that sounds bizarre to say, but when they get deep into your psyche, this is what happens. They don't want you to write a check. Sometimes they'll say, we'll send a courier to pick up the cash. And they'll ask you to put $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 in a bag and meet them somewhere in your town. So we're not talking about things that are long distance. It's all just over the phone. When they get that connection with somebody enough, they will send somebody to go pick up cash. And I've seen it. I've seen situations where this has happened. And you think it sounds so off the chart that it couldn't possibly happen. It absolutely does. So yeah, I mean, there's a number of red flags that we could continue going on, but those are the main ones. It's if they're wanting you to do something quickly without thinking about it. If it involves anything with gift cards or getting a debit card somewhere, that's another huge red flag. If they want you to make checks payable to entities that aren't the name of the entity that it. So, for instance, if it's Publishers Clearinghouse sweepstakes, if they ask you to make a check out to S&D Enterprises, that's not Publishers Clearinghouse. They'll explain it as if, well, this is who processes our transactional winnings fee. They'll set it up in some way, but if they're asking you to make a check out to someone other than the entity they say you won this from, it's not real. If they get an IRS representative on the phone with you during one of the calls, it's not real. That's not how this works, and they will use that as a form of manipulation to say, hey, well, if the IRS is behind this as well, then it's got to be legitimate, and it's not.
Oh, that's so scary.
Yeah.
I think that the sort of, the idea of somebody's asking you to put a bunch of cash together in one place, scam. If they're asking you to, wire a bunch of money or gift card a bunch of money, scam. So let's say I'm encountering one of these, and this is my too good to be true moment. I just won the lottery, John. I got this little red flag, and it's probably nothing. I'm probably just being paranoid. What advice would you give them of who should they talk to? Who are the top people on the list that if there's any chance that this is real, if I get on the phone with these people, they're going to give me good, legitimate advice? There's a couple that come to mind. What would you recommend? Who would you call if you think you might be getting scammed?
Yeah, well, I think this is probably self-serving, but if you have a financial advisor, call your financial advisor. If you have a CPA, call your CPA. Even a trusted friend or family member that was not getting sucked into the moment there with you, that can step back and just kind of offer that sounds a little odd. Just something that would help. But I would think friends and family, financial advisor, CPA,
banker.
Banker would be good. Not very many people have a lawyer that they work with frequently, so that would be a good source. But for most people, I think the first two or three things that pop into my mind would be a trusted friend or family member, and then CPA or financial advisor or banker.
And it's important to remember that, CPAs and bankers and financial advisors see this stuff all the time. And they're going to know what red flags to look for. John, I think that you have had to go through so much, different forms of compliance and all the other stuff that you have to do to protect people's, financial investments, that trying to convince you that all I need to do is buy a bunch of gift cards and wire them over. It's going to set off all the red flags I need to have a really, really, critical conversation. So I think that if there's any chance, you're never going to regret having a conversation with your financial advisor or your banker who they say, oh, you're right, you really did win the lottery. Congratulations, Nick. They're going to be happy for you, and they're probably going to have some good advice to give. But man, if it's the difference between you losing tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially, ask the question. Don't get rushed into something. I think that's a really powerful advice. Is there any red flags for, you talked about sort of the my friend statement, whether the text messages or phone calls or even in person, of things that you should be aware of, that your ears should perk up if you start to hear these things, again, the rush, the don't tell anyone. What else sort of perks up your ears for the language used around these scams?
Not only do they try to ingratiate, they also try to guilt. In many instances where, here's another situation we had where it was actually an in-person scam. It wasn't a phone scam. It was a young man in his late 20s, early 30s, who offered to do some yard work for a widow. And it started there, and then it kind of grew and grew, and then he introduced who he said was his 3-year-old daughter. Well, the widow loved it when he would bring the 3-year-old over and play, and then it was, well, we've got some medical bills for, baby Ellie, and I've got to come up with $1,200, or they're not going to keep treating her. Well, then the $1,200 is paid by the victim, and then it becomes, I'm trying to better myself. I'm going to go to this trade school, but it's $6,500, and the widow becomes, okay, she's so smitten with the 3-year-old, and they come around 2 or 3 times a week, well then sure, I'll help you to better yourself. Why wouldn't I? And it just goes, and then it's the vehicle. The vehicle's got a transmission that's out, and something else, and it's going to take $4,500 to get this paid for. And this elderly lady who did not have a lot of social engagement now has, and she had never married, so she didn't have kids or grandkids, had a situation where she was just enamored with this little 3-year-old and kept helping and doing, and then on her, to your point earlier, she decided, well, I could gift them some money, and I bet I could really help them. And she went to her bank and wanted to take out an unusually large amount of money, and the bank started asking questions, and that was the first shield, the first defense toward this scam. She did end up giving 2 or 3 times, gave substantial amount of money, but by the 3rd or 4th time, when she started questioning the gentleman that was doing this, the next day they were gone, never heard from again. So they know well how to get into somebody's head and heart, and they also know the signs of when they're about to get caught and can run.
That's so scary.
It's just there's no getting around that this is a real problem that's only going to get worse with as technology gets more and more provides more and more ability for this to happen.
John, as we kind of wrap up today, and I think that this is going to end up being a conversation that we carry forward in future episodes, because there's so many different facets to it. What is your sort of closing advice? What are some steps that we can take, whether we're kids or whether we're somebody who's at that retirement age, who's susceptible or highly susceptible to this, who we're going to run into this. We're going to run into it more and more as people. What are the closing advice, the closing steps that you want people to take and really consider in sort of the next phase over the course of the next 5 and 10 years?
Yeah, I think number one is never think that you or your loved ones would never fall for something. Let go of that, because that when that mindset sets in and something does start to happen, that's when it triggers deep dive into it, because the person thinks I would never fall. I'm not going to fall for that. I wouldn't fall for a scam. This is the real thing. So never ever assume that you or your loved ones can't fall for something like this. Number two, I hope we can expand on the conversation, because it is something that when someone does get caught up in it, it is very embarrassing. They feel like they've lost the capability to make good decisions. It really, it's the ripple effect way beyond finances is horrifying. So by just elevating the issue and maybe even if it just encourages 1 or 2 conversations that families have to say, hey, I heard about this. We all kind of need to think about what this means in our family and with our parents or with our grandparents or with our kids. And then take proactive steps. I think especially as we talk about AI coming on, that there needs to be a family phrase or a family word that everyone knows if someone is called by someone claiming to be the grandson who's stranded and needs a $2,500 wire. If they know the family phrase, and if they don't, it's a scam. It's probably a scam. So just there are some practical steps and some things that we should do, but I just hope by elevating the fact that this is something that anybody could fall prey to, and no one is above it, I think will hopefully set the stage for some really good conversation.
Yeah, John, I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for taking the time today to sort of dive into this one, and I really look forward to unpacking this in future episodes. I think that there's a lot to talk about here.
Oh, I agree, Nick. I look forward to it.
All right, we'll talk again soon.
Okay.
Security and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA, SIPC. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. Individual tax or legal matters should be discussed with your tax or legal professional. Economic forecasts set forth may not develop as predicted, and there can be no guarantee that strategies promoted will be successful. All performance reference is historical and no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. There is no assurance that the techniques and strategies discussed are suitable for all investors or will yield positive outcomes. The purchase of certain securities may be required to affect some of the strategies. Investing involves risk, including the possible loss of principal.